Hello to those who are listening. This is Valerie Florence. I'm the Associate Director for the grant programs at the National Library of Medicine, and I'm here to talk to you about grant programs. However, first I want to talk to you about the National Library of Medicine. And as you know, we're the world's largest biomedical library, and NLM maintains and makes available, vast array of print and digital resources. We also develop electronic information resources and tools that are useful and that are used by billions of times by millions of people all around the world. We're very proud of that. Excuse me. We also coordinate a probably 8,000 and something member national network that meets one of our primary goals, which is to make sure that clinicians and citizens and those who need it have access to the kind of health information they need to make good decisions. But in addition to that, we also support and conduct research, development, and training in biomedical informatics, data science, and health information sciences. So that's what I plan to talk about here. But first, I mentioned that we have research going on inside the library, so to speak. We call it intramural. One of those groups is the National Center for Biotechnology Information, excuse me, NCBI, and many of you are familiar with NCBI's fabulous collection of resources. Some of you have used my NCBI to develop your bios for your grants. There are many important data sets available here, and there is also a research group developing new ones. Now, the focus of NCBI is molecular biology information, but we also have the Lister Hill Center for Biomedical Communications, and the focus there, they are also an intramural research group, and their focus is more on the data, health data, published data, image data, publication data, the lexicography, the access tools, automated indexing, and de-identification, consumer question answering, tools of that type. And then third, we have, I call us the third leg of the stool, right? We have grant programs. These are extramural grant programs, which provide research and resource and training funds to organizations around the United States primarily. So we have 5 different kinds of grants. I'm going to talk a little bit about each kind and give a couple of examples. Some of these I won't give examples of, but I want to mention them. So, excuse me, we do give research grants, the famous R01 grants that many people associate with NIH. We also have exploratory developmental research grants that are smaller and more focused, and people can apply for to really do pilot testing of an idea. They don't have to have any preliminary data. They can just apply for this and try to do something new and then find out whether it'll work or not. But our resource grants are unique to NLM. Across NIH, there aren't others like these. We have one program that invites people to apply for funds to develop resources to reduce health disparities, so focused on target populations and ideally working with HBCUs and minority serving institutions. We also have a grant program for scholarly works in biomedicine and health. This is our oldest grant program, and it used to be called something like History of Medicine. It isn't only the history of medicine, it is also supporting research. So in a way, you could say a faculty member can buy some of their time in order to write a scholarly book. This isn't for writing your dissertation, but it is for writing scholarly works that are relevant for biomedicine and health. And the third type of resource grant we have, I already mentioned this network we have across the United States. They offer small contract awards in various regions as well. I'll talk a little bit more about them later. Workforce development grants. So NLM has, in a sense, built a big chunk of the field of biomedical informatics researchers through its university-based training programs. And we have 16 of those right now, and I'll talk a little more about them. We also offer predoctoral fellowships that aren't tied to those training programs, so that somebody at another institution could apply for predoctoral fellowship in biomedical informatics. And then there are career transition grants. The one that we offer, the NIH Pathway to Independence, provides funding for someone who has finished their doctoral degree and is ready to go out and get a job, and it provides some support for their first couple of years in their new position. And then not last, but definitely not least, small business innovation research grants and small business technology transfer grants. Any federal agency that gives grants also makes awards for small business grants, and so do we, and everybody else at NIH for that matter. So in 2019, just to give you a picture of our grant programs, right? We were managing a grant portfolio of about $68 million of value, and 9 of those were small business grants. But the point of this graphic is to show you that many different, informatics obviously applies in many different ways. Research projects come in with many different foci. We are looking for novel methods and approaches, but they need to have, it's not just thought experiments, they need to have application areas that can provide proof that things work and help the researcher move on to the next step. So, NIH, I won't spend too much time on this. There are 27 institutes and centers here. 24 of them award grants and contracts, and 19 of those are what we call categorical. That means heart, lung, and blood, or cancer, or dental, or arthritis. They have a category in their mission of physiology or disease or populations. And then there are 5 that are called non-categorical. We are one of those, National Institute of General Medical Sciences or the Genome Institute. Those are other examples that have a different kind of mission that is more cross-cutting and not tied to a particular condition or part of your physiology. The NIH budget in 2019 was about $38 billion. More than 80% of that budget went out to research grants and contracts and training grants at universities, medical schools, and other research organizations. And to put NLM into that context, our total NLM budget for the entire library and all of those services and research I mentioned was about $442 million in that year. And our grant budget was $65 million of that. So we are the smallest grant program at NIH. We call ourselves small but mighty because the work we do is really important and flows into grants that are supported by many other institutes as well. Now, you may know artificial intelligence is a hot topic everywhere. I guess it certainly is at NIH. And back in 2019, the NIH Advisory Committee to the Director of NIH had an artificial intelligence work group that was led by David Glazer from Verily, co-led by him. And it focused on ways to expand and shape the role of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning in NIH-funded research across the board. So they were talking to all of us, right? All 24 of us who give grants, and said they wanted to, so the recommendations in this report define training mechanisms and career pipelines that could support a greater emphasis on the use of these approaches, and also to explore major ethical considerations when you're talking about biomedical research and artificial intelligence. If you want to see that report more and read it, because it's a very interesting report with plenty of insightful recommendations, the URL is here so you can find it. So back to my 24 versus us, right? Any of the institutes and centers at NIH could be giving mission-related research grants that support AI applications, and lots of them already are. and we are too, but we're the only institute whose research, grants, and training focus solely on novel methods in areas like this. So over our history of giving grants since the 1980s, we've funded more than 500 artificial intelligence research projects. And if you're old enough to remember, artificial intelligence has come in and out of fashion several times. It certainly has in my lifetime. But we have consistently and continuously looked for ways that we can use intelligent systems and support the building of intelligent systems that will help us meet our mission goals. We have a couple of, these are just examples of 3 AI projects that we have going on now. One using AI to mine clinical text for temporal relationships. One that's looking at ways clinicians could be given immediate feedback on therapy and child health cases, and another one looking at ways that intelligence could be used to automatically curate big data instead of having, well, it doesn't scale if you say all the metadata and all the index terms have to be assigned by people. You need more than that in our world. So NLM has a strategic plan. We launched it in 2017, so we're a few years into it now. And I want to tie our grant programs also to the strategic plan because, of course, they are guided by it. So the first pillar of our plan is accelerating discovery and advancing health through data-driven research. Now, what I have on my slide here, our basic focus is novel methods and approaches in biomedical informatics and data science. That's what I would say to you in the parking lot if you ask me what it is we support in our grant programs. Now that means, so you can think about that, proof of concept, and in what areas, right? Biomedical informatics and data science, always, we're part of NIH, so it's always about human health, ultimately. So what I have listed here are examples of the kind of language we put into our funding announcements so that, you know how funding announcements typically work. We give you some parameters as examples of stuff we're interested in, but that is not everything we're interested in. That's to stimulate your thinking. And you're also, of course, we assume that if you want to know more, you will contact us, one of our program officers, to talk more about your ideas. You don't have to, but you could. But these problem areas, particularly discovery and linking these large heterogeneous data sets that we're all talking about now, that's a very important and difficult area. And visualizing information in a way that makes sense to different kinds of audiences is extremely important. And I'll say a little more later about this, trying to figure out how we can link all of the available data relating to an individual person's health, regardless of the source, so that they have a true picture of their health world. So I'm going to hit just a couple of examples of funded grants again, because sometimes people think informatics is a bunch of geeks. And, it's more than that. Maybe we are a bunch of geeks, but we also care about real world problems. And so this particular grantee is doing research on wastewater surveillance of infectious diseases. So they're looking at the wastewater and and identifying the relationships between the viruses they find in it, the viral genetics, and the epidemiology that they get from COVID-19 positive patients. So obviously a very important area, and there's a lot of interest in what we can learn from wastewater and other environmental resources that could help us predict or watch and see when new pandemics might be on their way so that we could do a better job of dealing with them. So this is another real world problem in communication between patients and clinicians. Sometimes there is unconscious bias that gets in the way. So this researcher is working on finding a way to support enhanced discourse to help with that. So the communication can be more helpful to both sides of the communication. This is another interesting area. You remember the opioid addiction and the NIH HEAL program, which is still going on. Actually, wastewater surveillance was occurring during that as well. But in this case, this researcher is looking at published articles and mining them to try and find combinations of gene, drug, and phenotype that are described in people's reports of research in order to come up with perhaps new drug targets or new research that could be done. We have a special program, grant program announcement for this is Pillar 2 in our strategic plan, reaching more people in more ways. And we have a special grant program we call Personal Health Libraries for Consumers and Patients. So we designed this. I thought about myself and also my family members. I have a relative who's had asthma for her entire life, who is going away to college someday when the pandemic's over. So what kind of health information will she take with her? Should she take with her? That's one kind of question. What about me as I age? If doctors are expecting me to manage my own health information, then I need to understand how best to manage it and how to protect it and think about whom I might want to share it with and might not want to share it with. So that is the focus of the research area here. We have 10 awards that are funded so far in this program, and I've just listed 3 of them here so you can see what they look like. This is another real-world problem kind of personal health research project. In this case, the researcher is using Google Glass to actually get information about neighborhoods, about the physical environment in neighborhoods, and then linking that information to mortality and morbidity statistics for the area to try and better identify neighborhoods that might be food deserts or don't have a way for people to get exercise, or it's too far to get to anything they need, questions like that. So again, just to summarize, this little graphic, I think, is a really great reminder that it's not just one thing that goes into what makes your health. There are many factors, and every one of those factors in this graphic could have a data set with it that is incompatible with the next one because they don't know how to link properly, and so there's plenty of work left to be done, I think, to try and create a real picture that would allow anybody to understand fully the forces that are affecting their health and to think about the relationships among them. So we support research and methods development in informatics and data science related to this, and especially tools that would help a clinician or a patient or a consumer find and use this full spectrum of data about themselves. So I mentioned our network of the National Library of Medicine. I'm only giving you their URL. There are many fabulous things going on. There are 8 regional libraries right now and thousands of members all around the country that make information available, that offer training programs, and that try to make sure that information can be tailored to meet the needs of particular populations. Digital health literacy is a big issue, and they've been working with the All of Us program as well, and with public libraries all over the country to help everybody improve their understanding of digital health information. This is the 3rd pillar of our strategic plan, building a workforce for data-driven research in health. So NLM has had university-based training programs for decades that have trained some of our leaders who are now people who are now leaders in biomedical informatics, or leaders as CIOs like at hospitals. We also have individual fellowships, as I mentioned, career transition awards. And I want to mention that our 2 intramural groups, the Lister Hill Center and NCBI, have trainee and visiting scholar positions available as well. Now, extramurally, we bring together, this is a map of our current collection of training programs, and we bring our trainees together every year. This year we had to do it virtually, and Oregon Health Sciences did that for us and did a great job, because we take everybody to the other campuses, right? We take turns going to different places because we want, for one thing, people may end up working in these places and they might like to see some other ways that biomedical informatics plays out in other universities from where they're being trained. But more importantly, ours is a really interdisciplinary field. And so for people to hear, right, so we do training in healthcare informatics, and we do training in translational bioinformatics, and in public health informatics and consumer informatics. And their focus areas and the methods they use are different. And so it's extremely important for all of them to have that sense of our science and what the possibilities are. Now, many of the last time we did, we're about to do another evaluation to get new numbers. The last time we did an evaluation, about 50% of our trainees were going into academic positions. Another 20% perhaps were going on for further training. There was a percentage, maybe 15 to 20%, that were going to work in businesses. That's gone up. And some are starting small businesses. Some are going to work in healthcare organizations. I have a list here on my slide of examples of companies where NLM trainees are working now. And we think that's a good thing. That's part of how we keep stimulating business and get the best science everywhere we can. So speaking of business, I want to say a couple of things about our business grants. So we're involved as a business innovator, supporting in business innovation, I would say, in our early investment in methods and models and prototypes that is done in research grants. And in our support for small business grants and small business technology transfer grants that I mentioned. But I think we're also an enabler in this sense. We are training a bunch of technology savvy people through fellowships and university training. And through our library resources and our intramural programs, we're making public access available to data and tools and text that companies and others can use to move forward with their ideas. On the general funding announcements for small businesses, this is what we say we're interested in, just as an example, right? Data integration and visualization, protecting confidentiality, annotating, curating, and managing data resources. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Because it's the same kind of thing we're interested in for research grants. And just to give you two examples from the business side of our grant portfolio, this particular grant is working on optimizing organ donation, which is a complex activity that involves going across institutional boundaries and protecting privacy of the people involved, things like that. And this one is also looking at complex environments, trying to use intelligent sensors and networks that could improve operating room efficiency. So that is all I want to say specifically about our grant programs. I want to do just a couple of minutes to urge you, if you haven't already learned to use it, to consider using the NIH Reporter to do some research on your own. If you're thinking about grants in your own institution, Reporter provides all kinds of reports and access to data. So this is just one kind of example. There is, here I've put in, like, let's say you wonder if you're at Case Western and you wonder who there has NIH grants, right? You could put your institution in, you get a list of everybody at Case Western who has an NIH grant right now. So if you were looking for someone to have a partnership with for some interdisciplinary research or to learn about NIH grants, this is one way to do it. Another way you could use this reporter, here I've put I'm doing a text search for artificial intelligence and clinical decisions. And in this, I've turned up a list. As you can see, it's 4 different institutes, right? If you look over on the column on the right that says funding IC, it tells you which institute is funding what. So you can get a sense of who is funding in a particular area, who meaning who at NIH is putting money into a particular area. And then a third thing you could do, you can cut and paste a paragraph, like here are my specific aims, or here's the research problem I have in mind, paste it in here, and it will go looking for similar projects that have already been funded by other institutes that will give you a starting point, might help you find a program officer to talk to. So those are 3 among many reasons that you could find something like this useful. So I'm closing out now, just reminding you that we have a grant program webpage that has information for you about the kinds of grants we give. So I'm showing you in this slide the list of some, but not all, of the research grants that we support. A couple of these are unique to us. Some of them are what are called the parent NIH grant, which means they don't say what specifically we're after. But we encourage you to always look at our one called NLM Research Grants in Biomedical Informatics and Data Science to see the most current listing of what our interests are. Or you could go up here to awards and click on that and see lists of grants that we've awarded all the way back to 1990s. Just because sometimes people like to get a sense of what kinds of grants you've already supported. However, if you do that, I do want to remind you, we are not looking to have 12 of the same thing, right? We're small. We're hoping to have expansion. So if you see a whole bunch, you want to talk to a program officer to see if that's an area that's a high priority for us. We also have some links to generic grant tutorials if you need them. They're produced by other institutes, but they're still helpful for you as well. And importantly, we have contact information for our grant program officers. Now, you know, many times I've talked to interested parties, grant applicants, and they've said, oh, you know, our program officers don't want to talk to us. How can we, how can we move forward? And we say, well, of course they want to talk to you. You can send them a paragraph, or you can send them a page, and they will set up a time to talk with you about your project. They won't tell you what to do. We will tell you what we're looking for and what we can see or can't see. If you said, I'm going to buy this off-the-shelf tool and use it to do X, our program officers will say, okay, where's the innovation in that, right? Where are the novel methods? What's new for informatics in that? So that's one side of our contact list here, is shows you the topic areas, although any one of them can answer a question and point you in the right direction. And then there's a list of information resources available at NIH that are useful for anyone who's interested in getting a grant.